Prior to the year 927, the British Isles were an unstable grid of independent territories. There was no central authority, just a patchwork of competing Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in the south, Celtic lands to the north and west, and entrenched Norse settlements occupying the center. That fragile status quo shattered when Æthelstan, king of the Anglo-Saxons, marched his forces north. He decisively seized the Viking kingdom of York, and shortly after, forced the remaining northern kings to formally submit to his authority at Emont. Æthelstan overhauled the nature of governance itself, replacing the old tradition of localized, wandering kingship with strict nationwide legal codes and structured royal councils that brought magnates from distant regions directly under his supervision. By absorbing York and tightening administrative control, Wessex morphed from a strong regional player into a dominant state. Æthelstan had built a machine capable of absorbing the rest of the island, and his neighbors recognized the danger immediately. To enforce this new reality, Æthelstan took absolute control of the economy. He mandated a single, uniform currency across all his newly conquered territories, stripping local rulers of their right to mint their own money. Looking at this silver penny, currency functioned as mass-distributed psychological warfare. Every transaction forced users to handle a physical reminder of who was in charge. The stamped Latin lettering explicitly declares him Rex Totius Britanniae, king of the whole of Britain, projecting absolute supremacy. This manuscript portrait illustrates how he reinforced his identity. Standing shoulder to shoulder with Saint Cuthbert, Æthelstan framed his singular sovereignty as a matter of divine approval. These administrative reforms were a cold calculus of statecraft. By embedding his absolute authority into the money people traded and the laws they followed, Æthelstan systematically eroded the autonomy of neighboring kingdoms from the inside out. Before pushing his military ambitions further north, Æthelstan had to secure a highly vulnerable southern flank. He executed a diplomatic strategy of marrying his half-sisters into the most powerful royal houses of West Francia and Germany. This math visualizes that diplomatic network. Connections radiate from Wessex across the English Channel, anchoring English interests deep within the continent's ruling families. By weaving his bloodline into European royalty, he built a political wall, deterring continental rivals from interfering in his domestic conflicts. Neutralizing the threat of a European invasion provided total political safety. It allowed him to turn his entire war machine, undistracted, toward the unconquered north. In 934, he launched a massive, unprovoked land and sea invasion of Scotland. A fleet like this advanced alongside a vast army, ravaging the territory in a calculated display of unmatched military capacity. The sheer scale of the invasion triggered absolute geopolitical terror among the northern leaders. It proved that Æthelstan could reach them anywhere and that their individual destruction was imminent. Out of that panic, an unlikely super-alliance formed. Constantine of Scotland, Owen of Strathclyde, and Olaf Guthfridsson of Dublin abandoned their lifelong cultural animosities to unite against the looming threat of Wessex. Olaf's Norse forces from Dublin brought a highly specific, raw military threat to the coalition. Looking at this rusted iron spectacle helmet, you get a sense of the brutal, physical reality of Viking infantry combat, a heavily armored, close-quarters fighting style that Æthelstan would now have to face head-on. This coalition was void of shared ideology. It was built entirely on the terrifying realization that if they did not fight together, they would be systematically wiped off the map. By August 937, the coalition was in motion. Olaf sailed his fleet out of Dublin, crossing the Irish Sea to merge his Norse warriors with the Scottish and Strathclyde armies mustering in the north. Here you can see the true scale of the invasion: 3 distinct, formidable streams of military power merging into a single massive block, penetrating deep into English territory. Instead of rushing to defend the border, Æthelstan exercised tactical patience. He allowed the invaders to plunder, while he coldly calculated the time required to gather an overwhelming host of West Saxon and Mercian troops, finally marching north to intercept them. Brunanburh functioned as a winner-take-all collision for total control of the British Isles. The battle itself was a claustrophobic, exhausting meat grinder that lasted the entire day. Thousands of men were locked tightly in a massive shield wall, engaging in a horrific, crushing physical struggle where inches of ground were paid for in heavy casualties. The casualty rate was staggering. The bodies of 5 young kings, 7 of Olaf's earls, and Constantine's own son were left in the mud. Unable to sustain the losses, the coalition finally broke. The surviving invaders routed in panic, forced to flee back across the sea to Dublin or retreat deep into the Northern Highlands. England was a political map violently hammered into existence through this singular, catastrophic blood sacrifice.